Somewhere in Jackson, Mississippi, a few years ago, a grandmother spent her retirement savings doing something she had dreamed about for 20 years. She landscaped her entire yard from scratch, front to back, hired a crew, picked every single plant herself, and created something that made her the proudest woman on her block. Flowering hedges, colorful border plants, blooming shrubs along the fence line where her grandchildren played every single weekend. It was everything she had imagined. Fast forward 8 months. Her small dog, the one that followed those grandchildren around the yard every Saturday, got into the trimmed clippings near the hedge after a routine garden cleanup. By that evening something was clearly wrong. By the next morning she was at an emergency veterinary clinic being told that her dog had ingested enough cardiac toxin from those clippings to cause serious heart disruption. The plant responsible? One of the 3 most popular flowering landscape shrubs sold across the entire American South. A plant she had picked herself from a reputable garden center. A plant with no warning on the pot, no safety information on the tag, and no disclosure from the nursery that sold it to her. And here is what makes that story hit differently than you might expect. She is not alone. Not even close. This is happening in yards across Georgia, across Louisiana, across Mississippi and Tennessee every single season. And the reason it keeps happening is not because people are careless. It is because the information that could prevent it is being kept from them at the exact moment they need it most, standing in that nursery aisle, reaching for that plant. That stops today. Right here. Let's get into it. Welcome to Evergreen Garden Life. If this is your first time here, please like this video, share it with someone who has a garden or a yard, and subscribe to this channel right now. Drop a comment telling me what time you are watching, and where you are watching from. And make sure you turn on that notification bell, so that every time we drop information like this, it comes straight to you and you do not miss a single thing. Now let us get into what you actually came here for. Here is something that almost nobody talks about when it comes to gardening and landscaping. We spend so much time thinking about how our yards look that we almost never stop to ask what is actually inside the plants we are putting in them. And that is not a criticism. That is just how it works. You walk into a garden center in Atlanta or Houston or Charlotte, and you are surrounded by color. Pinks and purples and deep reds and soft whites. Everything is lush and full and beautiful. The whole environment is designed to make you feel good about buying. And so you pick what looks gorgeous, you check the price, maybe you check if it needs full sun or partial shade, and you bring it home. That is the entire process for most people. And honestly, for most plants, that is completely fine. But there is a small group of plants, a specific, very popular, very widely sold group, where that process is genuinely not enough. Where what is hiding inside those beautiful flowers and those lush green leaves is something that no garden center is going to volunteer to tell you about. And today we are talking about 3 of them specifically: Oleander, Foxglove, and Azalea. 3 plants that between them are responsible for more cardiac-related plant poisoning emergencies in humans and animals across this country than almost anything else growing in American yards right now. And all 3 of them are sitting on nursery shelves this season without a single mandatory warning attached. Now before we go any further, I want to make sure you understand something clearly, because this matters. This video is not about scaring you away from gardening. It is not about telling you that every plant is dangerous, and you should only grow concrete. Gardening is one of the most rewarding, most grounding, most genuinely therapeutic things a person can do with their time and their outdoor space. This channel exists to help you do it better, smarter, and safer. But doing it better and smarter means having information that the nursery is not giving you. And that is exactly what we are here for today. Let us start with why this problem exists in the first place. Because understanding that is actually the key to everything else we are going to cover. When you walk into a garden center, there is a very specific psychological thing that happens. Beautiful flowering plants feel safe. That is not an opinion. That is just how human beings are wired. We associate color and fragrance and lush growth with life, with health, with nature doing what nature is supposed to do. A plant covered in deep pink flowers does not look like something that belongs in a warning label conversation. It looks like something that belongs in a front yard in Savannah or on a porch in New Orleans. And that feeling, that instinctive sense of safety around beautiful growing things, is exactly what makes this particular blind spot so persistent and so dangerous. There is also something else happening that makes it even harder to question these plants specifically. These are not obscure species that you have to special order from a catalog. These are plants that are everywhere. Drive through any neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama right now and you will see oleander lining driveways and subdivision entries. Drive through any established neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina in April, and you will see azaleas in almost every single front yard on the block. These plants are so common, so woven into the visual fabric of American southern landscaping, that they have become part of the background. And we do not question the background. When something is that familiar, that widely planted, that consistently present in the landscapes around us, our brains file it under safe without ever consciously making that decision. Municipalities plant oleander along highways across Texas and California because it is drought-tolerant and cheap to maintain. Homeowners associations across Georgia put azaleas in their community plantings because they bloom reliably and photograph beautifully for the neighborhood marketing materials. When the people responsible for public spaces are planting something at scale with no warnings, it sends a very powerful silent message to every homeowner who drives past it. If it was dangerous, surely someone would have said something. And that is where the gap lives. That is exactly where the information fails you. So let us talk about what is actually inside these plants. And I am going to explain this in plain language because the science here is genuinely fascinating once you strip away the complicated vocabulary. Oleander is probably the most dramatic example on this entire list. It is sold in garden centers from Florida to California. It grows fast, it blooms heavily, it handles drought and heat without complaining. And it produces clusters of flowers in deep pink, white, and red that make it look like it was imported straight from a Mediterranean garden. Nurseries across the South stock it heavily every spring because it practically sells itself. But every single part of oleander, the leaves, the flowers, the stems, the roots, and even the smoke produced when you burn the trimmings, contains a class of compounds called cardiac glycosides. Now I know that sounds technical, so let me put it in terms that actually make sense. Your heart beats because of a very precise, very carefully balanced electrical rhythm. Think of it like a drum being played at exactly the right tempo to keep everything in your body running properly. Cardiac glycosides are compounds that reach into that rhythm and disrupt it. In a controlled medical setting, a refined version of these same compounds is actually used to treat certain heart conditions. Doctors have been using digitalis, derived from these same chemical families, to regulate struggling hearts for over 2 centuries. But in a medical setting, the dose is measured down to the milligram and monitored closely. In oleander growing in your yard, there is no measured dose. There is no safe amount. A single leaf from an oleander plant contains enough of these compounds to cause serious cardiac disruption in a child. Not a handful of leaves. Not a prolonged exposure. 1 leaf. And the plant tag at the nursery says absolutely nothing about that. Foxglove is the second plant, and this one carries a history that goes back centuries. It produces tall dramatic flower spikes covered in tubular blooms in deep purple, soft lavender, creamy pink, and white with beautifully spotted throats that look almost hand-painted. Bumblebees and hummingbirds chase it relentlessly. It self-seeds freely, meaning once it is in your garden it tends to come back year after year without being replanted, which is something seed catalogs have marketed as a feature for generations. And it does perform beautifully in a garden border. Nobody is disputing that. But inside every single part of foxglove, every leaf, every flower, every stem and seed, are compounds called digitalis glycosides. These are the direct chemical source of digoxin and digitoxin, 2 heart medications that have been prescribed to cardiac patients across this country for generations. The physician William Withering, who first documented foxglove's medicinal properties back in the 1700s, was very clear even then that the line between a therapeutic amount and a fatal one was razor thin. In the wild plant growing in your garden border in Charlotte or your backyard in Memphis, that line does not exist at all. Any ingestion of foxglove causes nausea, severe vomiting, dangerous irregularities in heart rhythm, and in serious cases cardiac arrest. And here is the detail that tends to stop people cold when they hear it for the first time. Gardeners who work around foxglove without gloves and then touch their mouth have experienced toxic reactions from nothing more than that brief skin contact. You do not have to eat it. You do not have to make a deliberate choice to put it in your mouth. A normal afternoon of garden work without gloves is enough. Azalea is the third plant, and in some ways this is the one that surprises people the most because of how deeply familiar it is. If you grew up anywhere in the American South, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, azaleas were almost certainly part of your childhood landscape. They bloom in April and May in colors so dense and vibrant they look almost unreal. They are one of the top-selling landscape shrubs in the United States by volume every single year. And they have been planted in American residential gardens for so long that most people assume without ever consciously deciding to that something this common and this familiar simply must be safe. But azaleas and their close botanical relatives, rhododendrons, contain compounds called granulotoxins. These toxins interfere directly with the electrical channels in nerve and muscle cells, including the muscle cells of the heart. When ingested in enough quantity, granulotoxins cause nausea, excessive drooling, a dangerous drop in blood pressure, and serious irregularities in cardiac rhythm. In severe cases, the result is loss of consciousness or fatal cardiac complications. And here is the historical detail that puts the potency of this toxin into real perspective. There are documented historical records of entire military units being poisoned through honey produced by bees that fed on rhododendron nectar in the Black Sea region of Turkey. Not through eating the plant, through eating honey made by bees that visited the flowers. That is how potent granulotoxins are. And similar honey-related cases have been reported in parts of the Pacific Northwest where rhododendrons grow densely across large areas. And the bees that work those flowers carry the toxin into honey that reaches consumers with no warning of any kind. Now let us talk about who is actually getting hurt and how, because this is the part that tends to shift this conversation from interesting to urgent for most people. Children are at the highest level of risk from all three of these plants, and the reason is straightforward. Small children explore the world with their hands and their mouths. That is normal child development. It is not carelessness on the part of parents. A 2-year-old playing in a yard in Savannah does not have the capacity to distinguish between a leaf that is safe to handle and one that is not. The tubular flowers of foxglove specifically are the kind of thing that invites curious little hands because they look almost like small colorful bells you could pick up and play with. Oleander leaves fall from established hedges constantly, landing on the ground at exactly the level where toddlers are moving and exploring. And azaleas bloom at a height that puts their flowers and leaves directly within reach of any child old enough to walk across a yard independently. U.S. Poison Control receives calls involving all three of these plants every single year, and the cases involving children are consistently among the most serious in terms of the speed at which symptoms develop and the urgency of the medical response required. Pets face the same level of risk, and in some cases move through the danger faster than humans do. The ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center lists azalea among the most common plants responsible for canine poisoning emergency calls in the eastern United States. Dogs that chew azalea leaves, which many dogs will do without hesitation during normal yard activity, develop vomiting, severe drooling, pronounced weakness, and in untreated serious cases cardiovascular collapse. Veterinary clinics across the Southeast report azalea poisoning cases every single spring, specifically during the weeks when homeowners are trimming their shrubs and fresh clippings are landing in areas of the yard where dogs move freely. That detail matters because the clippings are accessible in a way that an established standing shrub often is not. A dog may ignore a shrub for years, and then encounter a pile of fresh cuttings on the ground after a Saturday afternoon of garden work. And that is when the call to animal poison control happens. Oleander follows the same pattern with dogs and horses, with veterinary clinics across Southern California and the Gulf Coast reporting cases every summer during trimming season when fresh clippings land near yards and pastures. And then there are the gardeners themselves. Adults who work around these plants regularly and have simply never been told what precautions to take. Foxglove is the most significant risk here because of that skin absorption factor. Handling foxglove without gloves during routine deadheading or trimming, and then touching your face or your mouth is a genuine exposure route. This is not a theoretical risk constructed for the purposes of making a scary YouTube video. American emergency rooms see these cases. They are documented. They are real. And they happen to experience gardeners who have grown foxglove for years without incident, and simply never knew that their bare hands were the exposure point they needed to protect. Now here is the part of this conversation that genuinely needs to be said clearly and directly. None of this is happening because garden centers are evil. None of this is the result of some deliberate decision to put people in danger. What it is the result of is a complete absence of any legal requirement to disclose it. There is no federal law in the United States that requires a nursery, a landscaping company, a garden center, or a seed catalog to tell you that a plant they are selling contains compounds capable of disrupting cardiac function. None. These plants move from the commercial grower to the regional distributor to the nursery floor to your shopping cart to your yard without a single mandatory piece of safety information attached at any point in that journey. The plant tag tells you the sun requirements. It tells you the watering schedule. It tells you what USDA hardiness zone the plant performs best in. And that is it. The rest is silence. And this hits differently in communities across the South and Midwest where these plants are most aggressively marketed and most heavily purchased every season. Garden centers in Atlanta and Houston and New Orleans stock Oleander and Azalea at the front of the store every spring because they sell fast and they sell at good margins. The marketing is beautiful. The displays are inviting. And the buyers walking through those doors are making decisions with incomplete information because the system that is supposed to inform them has no obligation to do so. That is the gap. That is the real problem underneath all of this. And the only thing that closes that gap is exactly what is happening right now. Conversations like this one that put the information directly in front of the people who need it before something goes wrong rather than after. Now I want to stop here for a second and speak directly to you. If you are watching this and you have young children, if you have dogs or cats, if you have elderly family members who spend time in a yard where any of these 3 plants are growing, this information is not just interesting. It is actionable. Right now. Today. And I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel before this video ends. Not eventually. Right now. Because this is what this channel does. Every single video published here is built around giving you the specific, honest, experience-backed gardening information that the nurseries and the seed catalogs and the landscaping companies are not giving you. Information that protects your family, protects your animals, and helps you make better decisions in your garden before something goes wrong rather than after. And if you walk away from this video without subscribing, there is a very real chance that the next piece of information just like this, the next thing we cover that nobody else is talking about, will drop and you will never see it. You will be back in that garden center next spring, reaching for the same plants, with the same gap in your knowledge. And that is not what I want for you. So subscribe. Turn on that notification bell. And let us keep going. So what do you actually grow instead? Because I want to be very clear about something. Everything we have covered today has a direct replacement that gives you the same visual impact, the same flowering performance, the same presence in a landscape, without any of the associated risk. And in most cases the alternatives are just as widely available and just as affordable as the plants they are replacing. For oleander, the direct replacement is hibiscus. Hardy hibiscus varieties thrive across USDA zones 4 through 9, which covers the majority of the continental United States. The flowers are just as bold and just as dramatically colorful as oleander blooms. Hummingbirds and native pollinators pursue hibiscus relentlessly from summer through fall, and it is completely non-toxic to children, dogs, and cats. In the deep south and southwest where oleander is most commonly planted, in yards across New Orleans, across Houston, across the neighborhoods of Atlanta, tropical hibiscus grows as a true perennial, and over time reaches the same impressive scale as a mature oleander hedge. Every bit of the visual impact, none of the hidden danger. For foxglove, your best replacements are penstemon and snapdragons. Penstemon is a native North American wildflower that mirrors foxglove's tall tubular form almost exactly. It thrives across USDA zones 3 through 9, and is one of the most consistent attractors of native bees and hummingbirds on the continent. Snapdragons give you the same vibrant color range, the same pinks, purples, and creamy whites, grow reliably across a wide range of American climates, and are completely safe for every person and every animal in your yard. Both are available through American nurseries and seed catalogs. Both require less water than Foxglove once they are established. Neither one carries a single cardiac risk. For Azalea, grow viburnum or native spirea instead. Viburnum produces generous clusters of white and soft pink flowers in spring, offers excellent fall foliage color, and provides berries through winter that feed native birds across the entire cold season. It grows across USDA zones 2 through 9, covering the full continental United States from the coldest northern gardens to the warmer transitional zones of the South. And it is completely non-toxic to dogs, cats, and children. Native spirea delivers comparable spring flowering density, thrives in similar growing conditions to Azalea, and supports native pollinators just as effectively as the plant it replaces, without any of the risk to the people and animals sharing your outdoor space. Before we close out today, here are the 4 specific steps I want you to take this week. Not eventually. This week. First, walk your yard and identify every flowering shrub and border plant you currently have growing. Write down the names. If you do not know the names, take a clear photograph of the leaves and the flowers and use a free plant identification app to find out what you are working with. Second, take every plant name you identified and search it on the ASPCA Toxic Plant Database. That resource is free, it is comprehensive, and it is updated regularly. The search takes under 30 seconds per plant and gives you a definitive answer about the risk level. Third, if you have dogs or cats and you find any of the 3 plants we covered today growing in your yard, contact your landscaping company or plan to replace them this season. Do not wait. The risk does not pause while you think about it. Fourth, if you ever suspect that a child or a pet has ingested any part of a toxic plant, do not watch and wait for symptoms to develop. Call U.S. Poison Control immediately at 1-800-222-1222 for humans, or the ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center at 888-426-4435 for pets. Both lines operate around the clock every day of the year. Time is the single most critical factor in the outcome of any plant toxin exposure, and the worst thing you can do is wait. Here is where we land today, and I want you to sit with this for a moment. The 3 plants we talked about in this video, Oleander, Foxglove, and Azalea, are not obscure. They are not rare. They are not plants that you have to go looking for. They are in garden centers across Atlanta and Birmingham and Charlotte right now, this season, displayed prominently, priced competitively, and sold without a single mandatory warning to the families and pet owners buying them. The grandmother in Jackson, Mississippi, whose story opened this video, did everything right. She researched her yard. She hired professionals. She chose her plants carefully. And she still walked away without the one piece of information that would have changed every decision she made in that garden center. Because the system that was supposed to give her that information had no obligation to do so. That is not acceptable. And this channel exists because it is not acceptable. Every video we publish here is about closing that gap, giving you the honest, specific, protective information that the industry is not required to provide and consistently does not. Your yard should be a place where your children play safely, where your dogs run freely, where your family gathers without risk hiding in the flower beds. That is what you deserve. And that is what we are here to help you build. If this video gave you something valuable today, something you did not know when you press play, do one thing before you close this tab. Share this video with one person who has a yard or a garden. One share. 10 seconds. It costs you nothing, and it may genuinely protect someone in your circle who has no idea this information exists. And if you are not yet subscribed to Evergreen Garden Life, I need you to think about this. Everything covered in this video today, you did not have it before you press play. The next video is already in production. And it covers something just as important, just as widely misunderstood, and just as completely absent from the conversations happening in nurseries and garden centers across this country right now. If you are not subscribed with that notification bell turned on, you will miss it. And missing it means going back into your garden next season with the same gaps that brought you here today. Subscribe right now. Turn on the bell. And we will see you in the next one.